Mantour Ministries presents the Mantour Guy Podcast. We may talk about football. We could mention bacon. We might reference Rocky movies. We'll probably discuss the Mantour conferences, but we'll definitely talk about how to grow in our walk with God. Here's your host, the Mantour Guy, Jamie Holden.
Hey guys, welcome to the Mantour Guy Podcast. Jamie Holden here, and I'm so happy to have you join us once again today. Well guys, today we're going to be looking at a topic that most people have experienced at some point in their life. It's a tough topic, it's a painful topic, but it's a topic that we all face, and we need to know how to handle in a godly, Christ-like way. So today we're going to be talking about grief, specifically good grief. We've all experienced loss in some form in our lifetime. We all have areas that we've grieved or we've seen other people around us grieve. And today we're going to look at how to properly handle these painful times in our lives, how to handle the loss, how to grieve, and how to help other people around us who may be experiencing grief. I recently had an experience to speak at a church who had just undergone a tremendous loss just days before I spoke there. One of the leaders of their church, one of the elders, foundation of the church, had been killed in a car accident, and the church was just devastated. And they called me a day or two before I was supposed to speak and say, we just had this funeral. This is the state of the church. Will you come in and speak? Can you share a little bit and help the church through this difficult time? So what we're going to listen to today is my message during this sermon when I spoke. It's full of advice on how to handle grief, how to deal with grief if you're facing it, how to help other people to work through their grief. I really feel this sermon's going to help people out a lot, and I hope you just take time today and listen to it and learn how to have good grief. So guys, listen to this message and learn what it means to be a man who handles grief in a godly way. I thought about, today starting off having you all turn to the book of Genesis and talking about Noah, because that sermon kind of just wrote itself this week, but I decided against it. We've all had enough of the rain, right? We want to enjoy the sun, and actually I did have another message prepared. It was about, based on our Invincible book, is talking about how to climb your mountains, how to conquer your struggles, and how to overcome areas in your life. And like I said, I'm really excited about that book. It talks about how to climb mountains. So there's 12 different mountains that most people face in their lives, things like fear, anger, shame, broken relationships, doubt, betrayal, pornography, grief, all kinds of things. And I'm really excited about it. However, I'm not going to talk about that today, so maybe you'll have me back another time to share that message. But I really felt God laid something else on my heart today. Larry contacted me this week, and he shared with me the tragic week that you guys have all had here at the church. And I just was praying to God, saying, Father, what do you want me to share? I felt very inadequate to come into that kind of situation and share, because I know you all are hurting. It's been a rough week. It's been exhausting. I know grief brings a lot of exhaustion, and you're all tired, and you probably just want to get through the service today, be encouraged, and go home. And the last thing I think any of you wanted to hear was a sermon saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to climb this mountain, you need to overcome that. I know during my life, when I was in a time of grief, I would have been really just annoyed with a message like that. So I just prayed about it, and I felt the Holy Spirit just say, just share from your heart, share your story, and share what you learned through your season of grief. I just want to give you guys some hope and some comfort here today. So that's what we're going to look at today. Because, grief and loss, it's something that we all experience in our life, right? At some point or another, you experience it. And you have all, as a church family this week, you've experienced that. You've experienced that pain of the loss, the shock, the disbelief, the sadness. For some, there could be anger, disillusionment, hopelessness. There's so many emotions come when you deal with the season of loss. And today, many of the room, they felt some of these feelings. You never saw this tragic passing of your Royal Ranger commander, one of the leaders in your church, somebody you all knew, somebody you all loved, somebody that was just close to all of you. And I just want to let you know, I understand where you're coming from today. I felt these feelings in my own life. For about 10 years of my life, my sister and I, we weren't in ministry. We lived with my mom and my dad for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons was my mom had something called environmental allergies. And what they were is she couldn't be around any kind of perfume, any kind of chemicals, any kind of smell at all. It would affect her lungs. We'd have to rush her to the doctor and get her help. It was not a life-threatening sickness, but it was a life-altering. It changed her life, it changed our lives, and basically for 10 years, our lives revolved around, taking care of my mom, making sure she didn't get around any smells she couldn't be around. During that time, we didn't get to go to church because my dad, for our whole life, was an abusive man, and he was off on Sunday, so we couldn't leave him alone with my mom because he would be abusive. He would do things that would make her sick, and we just couldn't leave her alone. And it was a very difficult time for our family. And, but we loved my mom, and we did what we could to help her, but it was still a very challenging time. It wasn't, like I said, life-threatening, but it was very, very life-altering for her and for us. And then one day, about 8 years ago, we were sitting in our living room. We just finished dinner. My dad was still at work. And we were sitting in the room laughing about something stupid I had done. I'd gone out that day. I went out in public to get the car fixed. And I had my shirt on inside out all day. And it was like a collared shirt, so it really looked ridiculous. And I just never realized it. And when I got home and my sister and my mom saw it, they just thought this was hilarious. And they were kind of like laughing at me. We were sitting in the living room having dessert, laughing. And all of a sudden, my mom stood up, and she just collapsed. And then she stood up again, she walked to her bedroom and lay down, and she collapsed again. And then within minutes, she had passed away in my sister's arms. She was gone, she was in heaven. And it was just a devastating loss for us. We weren't expecting it. We didn't see it coming. It's not at all what we expected to have happen that day. And, it was shocked. We were in pain. We had grief. We had, honestly, being totally honest, a sense of fear. What's my dad's abusive dad going, his reaction would be when he gets home? How's he going to respond to this? And, we felt grief like we never felt before in that moment. And grief and loss, they are powerful emotions, right? Anybody agree with me? It's very powerful when you experience that in your life. And they're often, when the death is sudden and unexpected, it's even like a heavier grief and even more shocking. You feel shocked, you feel numb, you feel stunned beyond words that actually happen. And often you feel helpless and you feel hopeless, you don't know what to do. And I understand that, I've lived that, and I know what that's like to be there. So today I just want to share with you a few things that my sister and I learned during our time of grief to kind of help you as a church kind of work through what you're dealing with, to help each other as a family, and then to help the immediate family that's lost their husband and father. So just to get started here, number one is only you know how to grieve. We live in a world where society tries to tell us how to grieve, what grief should look like, how much you should grieve, how little you should grieve. If people think you're grieving too much, they'll tell you, okay, it's time to move on. If people don't think you're grieving enough, they're like, why isn't this bothering you? Why aren't you upset? And a thing that I've come to learn is grief, the way you respond to grief has a lot to do with your personality type, how close you were to the person, and nobody else can really tell you how to grieve. There may be some people who people can't understand why they're so upset, but for them, the loss really hit home, and there's a relationship and the feeling there that other people don't understand, but they're experiencing grief. I know in our situation, my mom, my sister, and I are extremely close. Like I said, we did everything together. When she passed away, the funeral director said to us, I've never saw you and your sister and mom apart. I never saw any of you. It was all three of you were together. And we were really close. So our grief didn't fit into the normal, 30-year-old guy whose parents passed away, who he wasn't living with. And people didn't understand that it was deeper grief, and we really were upset. And we had a lot of people pressuring us, like, okay, now, time to move on. Your mom's happy in heaven. It's time to get over it, not to grieve. You shouldn't be this upset. And it was really hurtful to us. And we had other people saying, I really thought you guys would be a lot more upset than you are. Why aren't you guys more upset? And it's like, that doesn't help anybody. We need to let people grieve where they are, not put pressure on them to be one way or another, but just to be there for each other and help each other through. One of the most helpful pieces of advice somebody gave to us during this time was a woman who said, things are going to be hard for a few months, your heart's going to hurt, and life's going to be difficult for a while. But in time, things will get better. In 6 months, it's not going to hurt as bad. The first holidays will be difficult, but then it'll get easier after that. Let yourself feel the pain now and not rush through it, but know that it's not going to be this way forever. Things will get better. And her words really released my sister and I from these feelings of any guilt or embarrassment that we were grieving so heavily. So I encourage you, if you feel you need to grieve, grieve. Don't feel embarrassed if you're not grieving as much as anybody else. Everybody has their own pace. Another thing to go along with that is you can't hurry grief. Even more than the pressure to grieve or not grieve, one of the hardest things when people want you to grieve and move on. Like a week after the funeral, 2 weeks after the funeral, if you're still upset, they're kind of like, well, why are you upset? What can we do to help? And they're well-meaning, But they don't understand, for some people, it takes a little bit longer to grieve. Now, you don't want to be grieving 2-3 years as bad as you are the day after it happened. There needs to be some progress, but you don't need to be pressuring people like 3 or 4 days later of, all right, it's time to move on, it's time to get over this. And that's just not what we're called to do as a family of God. In our situation, we had somebody who literally hours, like it was the same day as a funeral, hours after the funeral, saying, all right, now your mom's in heaven, she's happy. It's time for you guys to go out and do ministry and serve and help people. And we just weren't there. We weren't ready to do that. In time, we could, but we just put my mom in the ground a couple hours before. We weren't there. We were still grieving. And through that experience, I've learned sometimes you can't listen to what other people say. You have to rely on the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit knows your heart. He knows what you're facing. And sometimes you have to tune out the voices around you, let the Holy Spirit lead you, and let Him guide you of how to overcome your grief. And, sometimes you need a little help from God's people. And I know that seems contrary to what I just said, but it's not. We can't go through life alone, especially times of grief. You need each other as a church family. You need to be there for each other during this time. And I know you've already had the funeral, and it's often tempting to went to funerals over to get back to life. And that's good to go back to life. I'm not saying not to do that, but you still need to be there for each other and helping each other, especially the family. One of the things that helped us the most was having a Council of Assemblies of God pastor who really helped us during our time of grief. We could talk to him and share things, and he could give us wisdom and advice, because honestly, we had to start our lives over after my mom passed away. 10 years of our lives was dedicated to her, and when she was gone, we had all right, now we got to get jobs, have a life, and minister, whatever. And he could see things in a perspective that wasn't clouded by grief, so his advice helped us. Maybe you don't feel you need counseling, but you need to have friends, trusted friends that you can rely on, people you can talk to. And if you're sitting here today and you're not experiencing that deep sense of grief, maybe you can be that friend that somebody who is can come to, and you can let them cry on your shoulder. You can be there for them. No matter where you are today, there's some way that you can help somebody else who is really struggling, really grieving, to be there for them. All right, the next point I want to share was a huge point for us. And I know it's a huge point for anybody who's dealing through a season of grief, is don't get stuck in guilt or blame. I mean, that is our natural go-to default when something happens. You start thinking, what if I had done? Or what if I hadn't done this? Or what if this hadn't happened? And sometimes for people on the outside looking in, they don't mean to, but they cast blame of, what if you hadn't done this? What if you had done that? A lot of people, when my mom passed away, said, what if you got into the hospital sooner? Or what if you had seen us coming? And it happened. There's nothing we could have done about it, but that put a lot of guilt on us. And, we have I wish I could have been there. Maybe if I had done more. What if I had done something differently? And all these questions when you're grieving, they race through your mind. It's natural. It's part of being a human being with feelings and emotions. But the truth is that death is part of life. It's one of the hardest parts of life because we can't control it, right? I mean, as human beings, we like to think we're in control. We like to be in control, know what's going on, handle things, know what's going to happen. But life and death, God's in control of that, and we don't have control of it. Pastor Jim Cymbala from Brooklyn Tabernacle said, no matter what is happening around you, as Christians, you will not die 1 second before God wants to take you home. And that's hard to accept for us at times, but yet it's true. Somehow we have to believe that God is in control. God knows why he allows things to happen, even when we can't understand why God would take this amazing father and husband and leader in the church who was doing a great work with your church's young men. Why God would do that. God knows why. But I also don't want you to think I'm being cold about this, because I understand that we need to understand it, but still it hurts. The pain's still there. And, I found that, one of the best ways to overcome these feelings of guilt and also of blame is just to talk to Jesus about how you feel. Let him know. Talk to somebody else about how you feel. So often when you feel these feelings, you share it to somebody else, they can help you see the truth, that it wasn't your fault. There wasn't anything you can do. It just helps you be able to heal and to get wisdom and perspective from somebody else. I know it was a huge help to my sister and I, because we really did struggle with, what if we had gotten mom to the hospital? Even though she couldn't have gone to the hospital with her allergies because of all this chemical smells in the hospital, she wouldn't be able to do it. We wrestled for a long time with that, and we eventually had to get to the place where we realized God did it for a reason, and our job is just to trust God and keep moving forward with him. All right, guys, we'll be back with the second half of this message right after the break.
Yep. You're listening to the Mantour Guy Podcast.
Did you know that over 33% of girls have seen pornography online before the age of 13? Protect your daughters by installing Covenant Eyes on all your computers and mobile devices. Covenant Eyes blocks all pornography so that it can't reach your little girl and cause damage to her spiritually or emotionally. Sign up today using the code MANTOR and receive 1 month of service free. Guys, that's a no-brainer. Try it for a month and see how it helps protect your precious daughters from the filth of internet porn. Sign up using code MANTOR, MANTOUR, at covenanteyes.com today.
Listen to the Mantour Guy Podcast on the go via Apple Podcast and Google Play. Thanks.
Hey guys, Jamie Holden here. Did you know that only 10% of churches have a healthy, thriving men's ministry? That's only 1 out of 10 churches. Well, my mission is to see this number become 100%. Join me in my work with HEUS Missions to help develop men's ministry in the local church. Become a monthly financial investor in the work God called me to do by going to mentorministries.com/partner and clicking on the Give Online button. Together, we can see God continue to move among men.
Follow the Mantour Guy on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks.
All men want one thing in life, to be remembered. The good news is we all have a legacy. This is the question though, will you leave behind a good legacy or a bad legacy? Learn how to create a godly legacy in Mantour Ministries' book, Legacy, Living a Life That Lasts. By reading the stories of godly men from the Bible, working through the study questions, and taking up the legacy challenges at the end of each chapter, you'll be well on your way to living a life that lasts. It also includes a bonus workbook that you can use with your small groups. Order your copy today at mentorministries.com. How will you be remembered?
Order your copy today at mentorministries.com. Welcome back to the Mantour Guy Podcast.
Okay, the next thing I want to share with you is this. Actions speak louder than words, especially inappropriate words. Many people said a lot of things to me and my sister during their time of grieving. And to be honest, I don't remember a lot of what people said to us unless it was something like really hurtful. I mean, let's be honest. Well-meaning people during times of grief sometimes say really stupid things. They don't mean to say stupid things, but they do. They say hurtful, they're well-meaning, and they're trying to encourage you, but it lands on you like they punched you in the face. I remember one person said to us, and I know their heart was good, but they said, well, your mom's happy in heaven, so now your life can be happy, and maybe this will be what your dad saved, and everything's going to just turn out great for you now. And in my grief, what I heard, it's not what they meant to say, but what I heard was, you blame my mom for everything that was going on in our lives. You thought she was the problem. You thought she was the reason my dad was abusive. You thought she was the reason, and it crushed us. It wasn't what they meant, but it's what they said. And I've come to find some of the best things you can say to somebody is just to tell them what the person meant to you. When you talk to the family, let them know what he meant to you, how he impacted your life, how he touched you. I remember that was one of the nicest things people did to us. We had a woman who my mom hadn't talked to for years, but she had been in my mom's life when my mom first got saved, and she just told us what my mom's walk with God meant to her and how she just was so impressed with how much my mom loved God. And my mom, when she got saved, she sold out to God 100%. And she always said in her whole life, nobody ever wanted her, but when she got saved, somebody finally wanted her. And she was with God forever. I mean, I've never met anybody with a relationship with God like my mom had. But she just shared how much that meant to her. And other people shared memories of good times they had with my mom. And those are the kind of things that you want to say. But even more than words, I remember the things that people did. I remember the night my mom passed away. It was kind of a night like we had this past week where it was just rainy and ugly and windy. And it was just a really nasty night. And we had a friend who lived 2 hours away. When he heard that my mom passed away, he drove to our house through this horrible weather. And this man was a very affluential doctor. He was a well-known man. He came to our house, and he walked in, and after he talked for 3 minutes, he saw the dirty dishes were still in the sink from dinner because it happened right after dinner. And he rolled up his sleeves, and this man started washing these dishes so that we wouldn't have to take care of it. I'll never forget that. Just that simple action to him wasn't a big deal, but it meant the world to us. It meant the world to my sister. And I remember a man who at the time was just an acquaintance. I didn't really know him that well. He was, now in my life, he's a mentor. He's a very close friend. But when he found out my mom passed away, he called me immediately. And I don't think I'd ever even talked to him on the phone before that point. But I'll never forget that this man took time to call me and let me know that he was sorry and that he cared and he would be there for us. And like I said, actions, they speak so much louder than words. So I want to encourage you. This family's going to need you guys for the long haul. It's very easy once you get through the initial shock and the initial first couple weeks to, once life gets busy, to move on. It's natural. But I encourage you, just make a little note in your calendar for maybe a month from now. Send a card. Maybe 2 months from now, take a dinner over. Find a way to let them know down the road that you care. I cannot tell you how much those actions are going to mean. As a church family, you can continue covering this family in love and letting them know that you're there for them. I encourage you, take action, do that. It will mean more to them than you ever know. Another thing I want to share with you is Jesus can handle your grief. And this is, of all the points I shared, this is probably the most important one. I want you to really hear this one. Jesus can handle grief. The next one example of this is a story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. It's in John 11, and we read the story of how Lazarus died. And, Jesus, he could have came and he could have healed him, and everything could have been okay, but he delayed coming, and he died, and then he showed up. And as we look at the passage here, when Jesus finally did arrive on the scene, Mary and Martha, they were drowning in grief. Let's look at it here. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. All right, Mary was so upset that she couldn't even go and greet Jesus. She was so grieving and so upset there. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Verse 32, when Mary finally reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. Okay, each of them in their own way kind of blamed it on Jesus, right? They kind of said, this is your fault. If you had been here, he'd be okay. You're not here, he died. This is your fault, Jesus. And it was because they were filled with so much pain and disappointment. It wasn't unbelief. It was disappointment. They were shocked at what had happened. They were confused. They were grieving. So how did Jesus respond to these two hurting women? Let's look at it here. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then these two words, Jesus wept. Jesus was moved by their heartache. He identified with their pain. He didn't say to them, come on, get a grip, it's time to move on, this is what God wanted, you need to accept this. No, he cried with them. He comforted them. He was there for them. He saw their emotional pain that they were suffering, and he wasn't offended by their questions. He didn't yell at them for their accusations, but instead he responded to them in love, and he said, I know where you're coming from. And even though Jesus knew why what had happened, what God's plan was, he knew they didn't know that. And he didn't hold them to that. Instead, he loved them. He comforted them. He was there for them. He didn't judge them. His heart went out to them. And I'm here to tell you that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And just like back then when his heart went out to them in grief, his heart goes out to each one of you here today who are experiencing grief, no matter what level of grief it is. He feels that pain. He's there for you. Hebrews 4 verses 15 to 16 says, we don't have a high priest who is out of touch with our reality. He's been through weakness and testing. He experienced it all but the sin. So let's walk right up to him and get what he's ready to give. Take the mercy, accept the help. The Bible even says in another verse in Hebrews that Jesus prays for us. Because he came to earth and he experienced humanity, you have to remember, Jesus experienced loss. His stepfather, whatever we call him, stepfather, Joseph, he died when Jesus was on earth. And Jesus experienced that loss and that grief. And he understands when you're grieving, when you've lost somebody, he knows what that feels like. And he's there for you. And it says about he prays for you to the Father. He intercedes on your behalf. And, he's there to help you through. He isn't offended. He says, come to me. Tell me how you feel. Let it all out. I understand that you're hurting. And just like he did with Mary and Martha, he wants to be there for everyone in this room. He'll help you walk through every step of the grief process and help you start life again. I know he did it for me and my sister. I can stand here as a testament saying he did that in our lives, and I know he will do it for you. And in our grief, there's another important step is we need to run towards God, not away from him. All right, let's be real and honest. I'm a real and honest kind of guy. When we experience grief, it hurts. And we don't like to hurt, right? Who here likes to hurt? Raise your hand. Exactly, nobody. We experience this grief in our life, and it hurts. And so often the tendency is to find a way to ease the pain. And I've seen so many people make some really bad decisions in their grief, to turn to drugs, medication, alcohol, sex, all kinds of really dumb decisions, and walk away from God to help ease the pain. And I'm here to encourage you today, during this time of grieving, don't walk away from God. Run towards him. He is there for you. He is the one that can heal your hurt. He's the only one that can help you deal with the pain. Don't run away from God. Don't pursue other things that are just going to give you temporary satisfaction, where he can be the one who heals you permanently. You need to commit your way to God. You need to say, God, I don't understand why you did this. I don't know why this happened, but I'm still committed to you, and I'm still going to follow you. I can tell you God has a plan for everybody in this room's life. And no matter what tragedy you face, whatever hard time you go through, none of it came as a surprise to God. He already knew about it. He was ready and prepared to help you through it. He's there for you. And I know it can be a difficult choice to continue following God and to submit your will to his. I know it's hard. It's easier to trust ourselves in what we can see, and it's hard to trust God in the things we can't see. But still, he's the only one that has the answers. He's the only one that's going to be able to help you through these hard times. So I encourage you, don't turn away from God, but run full towards him. And as I touch on my last point, could somebody come up to the panel, please? I appreciate that. For number 9 here, there is hope. I want everybody in this room to hear, there is hope. Psalms 30 verse 5 says, weeping may stay for the night, but rejoicing comes in the morning. And as we're going through the grieving process, we need to remember that this is only a season in life. You're not always going to be grieving. You're not always going to be starting over in life. Eventually, your new life will become your normal life. And right now, if you're in a place of grieving and starting over, you feel like the world's come to an end. I know what those feelings felt like. That night when my mom passed away, I felt like our lives came to an end. But it wasn't. It was a different beginning. It was a different life. I'm not going to say it was better. I'm not going to say it's worse, but it was different. And that's what you do. But, on the other hand, you're probably scared. We were scared. We wondered, what did the future hold? And honestly, that night, I never would have imagined I'd be standing here in a church as a missionary and running a men's ministry speaking to you about this, because before this happened in my life, I wasn't really that sensitive of a guy. I wasn't that really caring of a guy, and I wouldn't have been able to talk to you about how to handle grief. But God takes everything in our lives and he uses it to help other people. And, the Bible says in Isaiah 61 that Jesus will comfort all who mourn. He'll provide for those who grieve in Zion. He'll bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and the garment of praise instead of spirit of despair. Matthew 5:4 said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 4 says, "There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. There's a time to weep, there's a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn, and a time to dance." And I don't mean to sound insensitive at all sharing this point, because I know how you feel, but I want to encourage you that this isn't going to be forever. The grief is not going to be forever. And how do I know this? Well, a few years ago, my sister and I, she had a speaking engagement near the ocean down in Delaware. It was on a Saturday morning, so we drove down Friday night, and we drove down to the ocean on Friday night. And as we were driving into the ocean, we were both just really excited to go and spend a night at the ocean. And people probably thought we were crazy with all the selfies we were taking and just how much we enjoyed it. We just had a ball that night. It was beautiful watching the sunset and the moon rise over the water. It was just a great night. And the thing is, that hadn't been the first time we had been to the beach recently in the 15 years since we were with my mom and stuff. But this is the first time we enjoyed being at the beach. Because the truth is, we had been to the beach 8 years earlier. My mom died in the beginning of May, and that year, Mother's Day was like 2 or 3 ways. What? Oh, I'm sorry, she died in March. I should know that. That's bad. Anyways, and then Mother's Day came, and we tried to run away from the pain of Mother's Day, our first Mother's Day without our mom. So we went to the beach for vacation. And let me tell you, I learned a lesson: you can't escape grief. It follows you, right? But we did. We ran away. We weren't going to experience it. And as soon as we checked in the hotel, we went into our room. As soon as we opened the door and walked in, you just smelled the chemicals that they used to clean the room. And in our minds, it all right away triggered, danger. It's going to make Mom sick. And then we had to realize, but Mom's not here. She's in heaven. And then the grief just covered us again, and we had to start feeling the pain again and working through it again. And honestly, it was the most awful vacation we ever had, and we were home within 24 hours. We didn't stay, we left, we went home. But now, years later, we were driving towards the ocean again. And this time, it was different. We remembered that trip and how it felt, but there wasn't the pain. The grief wasn't there. There was no intense grief. And even though I remembered my mom when we were on the boardwalk or when we went to her favorite saltwater taffy store, I remembered the good times we had with her as kids at the beach, the grief was replaced by joy and good memories of times gone by. And it really is true. In that moment, I realized the grief was gone. God had healed us. God had helped us through that time. The pain had healed and we had healed. And I'm telling you, it really is true. You're weeping, it's going to endure for a night, but there is joy in the morning. And as we laughed at the beach, we had a fun time. I never thought I'd be standing here using that story as a testimony to try and encourage you. But God uses everything in our lives to help other people. And healing comes, joy returns. The pain fades and better memories, they come. You remember the good times. So today as we close, I just wanted to spend a little family time together. You're all a church family, and you've welcomed us into your family here today. And I just want to spend a little time here. If there's somebody here today that you just feel like, it's been a really rough week, and I need prayer. I need somebody to hold me up in prayer. I need my family to help me and hold me and pray for me. If that's you, would you just please stand where you are right now? There's no need to be embarrassed. We all grieve, we all have pain. But if you feel like you just want somebody to pray with you, would you please just stand right now?
The Mantour Guy's final thought.
All right, guys, I'm going to be totally honest with you. That was probably the toughest sermon I've ever preached. I've honestly never spoken about my mom's death publicly before that day, and I was really nervous. But God gave me the strength to go through and do the message, and it really touched the people of the church, and I hope it helped anybody listening today. We're hoping to have guests back again next week. My asthma is still really killing me. You can probably hear it in the wheezing in my voice. But we just wanted to bring a new podcast this week and wanted to let you know how to handle grief in your life. We've all experienced loss. We've all experienced pain. Maybe it's not death that you've lost, but you've experienced grief of a broken relationship or grief of a loss of a job or grief in any way. We all need to know how to handle grief because often the enemy tries to use our grief to get us to walk away from God. We talked about that in the message, how the enemy will try to get us to turn from God, turn to other things to ease our pain and give us comfort. But guys, I encourage you, as you're dealing with grief, walk towards God, run towards God, rely on God to help you through these hard times. And if you see somebody else who's grieving your life, you want to help them, continue to point them towards God. Help them see the only answer to help them overcome their grief is God. So guys, I just wanted to bring that to you today. We hope it helped you. We hope it touched you. We hope you were able to learn how to handle grief the way God called his men to handle it. Before we go, guys, we have one more thing we want to take care of today. We have one more little bit of business to take care of here. So here we go.
The Mantour Lead Pipe. Write it in ink NFL pick.
Usually we do these picks right during the commercial break, but I didn't really feel it was appropriate to do this week with such a heavy, relevant topic. So we're going to throw it here at the end. We're going to do our Week 8 Lead Pipe Write it in ink picks. This week I have the Rams are going to beat the Packers. The Rams are just going to keep rolling. I don't see the Packers beating them in that game. We have the Bears, who have been a big surprise this year. I say they're going to beat the Jets. Bears offense has come alive. The defense has been pretty good, except that game against the Dolphins. And my right inning pick this week, guys, is the Bengals over the Bucks. That's going to be a great game. I have a lot of fantasy players in both of those teams. It's going to be a high-scoring shootout. It's going to really help my team a lot. But I do think the Bengals will beat the Bucks. You can write that in the ink. All right, guys. So once again, guys, as we come to close here today, I want to thank you once again, like we do every week, for giving us your time to listen today. I would love it if you took a second and shared the podcast on social media. If you went over to iTunes or if you went to Google Play and liked the podcast, gave it a good 5-star review so other men can learn about the podcast, so other men can learn that it exists and they can help them grow in their walk with God. Guys, we're also available on Google Play, like I said. And like I said, the more 5-star ratings and reviews that you give the podcast, the more men can find it and the more men can listen. Also, guys, don't forget you can visit MantourMinistries.com. We've just updated the website with all the conference information for 2019, the dates, location, the speakers. It's all there. We have information on our books, our resources. So check it out at MantourMinistries.com. And guys, once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the Mantour Guy Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Mantour Guy Podcast. Be sure to visit MantourMinistries.com to learn more about our books, men's ministry resources, and our Mantour conferences.
Before we go, guys, one last thing. We did talk about it in the podcast, but if you sign up with Covenant Eyes at CovenantEyes.com and you use the code MANTOR when you check out, you can receive 1 month of free service. Guys, what do you got to lose? You can try for 30 days, see how great it is, see how helpful it is to your walk with God. I guarantee you're not going to want to get rid of it. You're going to love it. So try it, protect yourself, protect your family, and raise up a standard against the enemy as he is trying to attack you and your loved ones. Try Covenant Eyes for free for 30 days using the code MANTOUR. It's MANTOUR at CovenantEyes.com. Try it today, guys. What do you got to lose?
The Mantour Guy Podcast, helping men grow in their walk with God.